I'd like to now introduce our fifth and final speaker for tonight. Kanjun Qiu is a senior at MIT studying electrical engineering and computer science. She is president of Traders at MIT, a group dedicated to educating students on campus about trading and the financial industry, and co-taught a 4-credit course on trading for the past 2 years. Kanjun is passionate about technology and education and is currently working on her master's in engineering in the high-load tech group in the MIT Media Lab. There she combines traditional technology with craft and unique materials to create a different class of electronics. Tonight, she'll be talking about the cultural issues in engineering and computing and how her work aims to expand on that culture.
I need some water. In 1985, 37% of undergraduate computer science degrees were awarded to women. In 2010, that number has dropped to 11%. 11%, that's 1 out of every 10 people. At MIT, I see this everywhere. My male colleagues in computer science often complain about how there aren't any girls anywhere. They can't find any. But this is a real problem, kidding aside. This is a problem because since 1985, the number of computers and the prevalence of technology has increased exponentially. It's everywhere now, but the ratios have not improved. This is a problem because there's so much lost potential when half the population doesn't pursue technology or computer science for the wrong reasons. And what are the reasons, really? Well, clearly, there hasn't really been a shift in genetic composition of women in the past 20 years. Instead, the reason is cultural. Since 1985, the culture surrounding computer science has shifted and solidified. And now, the culture, when you think about it, when you think about who builds technology and who plays with technology, who is the person in your mind? It's probably a guy. That's the expectation that's been formed. So today, I'm going to talk to you about all of the issues in computing and how I approach this problem. I work with a lot of young women in middle and high school, and I'm going to need a clicker. Oops. I work with a lot of young women in middle and high school, and I ask them often, what have you ever played with electronics before? And of course, the overwhelming answer is no. And I ask them why not. And often, surprisingly, they say it's because it's not a girl thing to do. It's not a girl thing to do. In fact, one 12-year-old girl told me, it's a boy's toy, kind of like trucks. Oh no. And so, there's been a lot of research on this. Margulis and Fisher at Carnegie Mellon University researched this and said, and found, interestingly, that a lot of women leave computer science not because they have poor academic performance, not necessarily even because they've lost interest, but because they've lost confidence. And they've lost confidence because they compare themselves to their peers, and they found themselves lacking. And I've encountered this too. When I first started studying computer science here at MIT, I struggled. I struggled because I saw everybody around me, and I thought I was not good enough. That everybody around me was more talented, faster programmers, better mathematicians, better at everything than I was. So what was I doing here? And on top of that, I thought, well, I'm a girl, and people aren't going to respect me because I'm a girl in computer science, and the expectations are all wrong. They think I'm not going to know anything, right? And so in order to get people to respect me, I've got to do all the hard things. I have to take all the hard classes. I have to do all the hard projects. And if I do everything that's hard, then people will respect me. Now let me tell you, don't do that. That's a bad idea. But it is a prevalent problem. It's a prevalent cultural problem. And there have been a lot of people working on this problem. And I think part of what inspired my work now is my experience at MIT, my experience with what I felt was a very hostile culture. Now I work in the MIT Media Lab. And my work involves teaching people electronics and computer science, but I do it in a very particular way. Instead of trying to force people into the traditional computer science mold that often a lot of work in this field does, I believe that we need to provide new avenues, new approaches to drawing people into computer science and keeping them there. And so I believe in providing different options and different entry points into electrical engineering, into computer science, and into technology. I work in the high-low tech group at the MIT Media Lab, as you guys have been heard already. And we combine electronics and craft. We use new materials like fabric and paper, and we integrate electronics into them. It's unheard of. We do this by using materials such as conductive thread and conductive fabric. And instead of using wires and soldering them into circuits, we actually sew circuits together. So this is an example you can, oops, I should be gesturing here. This is an example you can see the conductive thread. And you can see that in the center is what we call the LilyPad Arduino. It's designed by Leah Beakley, who's here in the audience. It's a microcontroller board that basically means it's a small computer that is specifically designed for being sewn into. And you might be wondering what kinds of projects are created with this board and with these kinds of materials. Obviously, you can't create traditional electronics that have hard shells, made of wires, made of plastic. Well, I can tell you that I've made all sorts of things. I've made everything from a very adorable plush monster that lights up when you squeeze it to a fabric piano keyboard. This is a touch-sensitive fabric piano keyboard. When you touch the pads, they're keys and they play music. And this is a prototype that's very cute and designy, but you can imagine creating an entire piano keyboard made of this material that you can roll up and carry somewhere and play piano on. Really cool. I've also made a glove that does gesture recognition. And so you can see that these types of projects are very different, very diverse, and different from the traditional computer science projects. People can do all sorts of things that are applicable to so many different fields. And just as these new materials change the expectations of what for what electronics should look like and what it should feel like, it also changes the types of people who engage in electronics. And we call this field computational textiles. Interestingly, we've seen that computational textiles, and in particular the LilyPad Arduino, draws 65% female participants, where a normal hobbyist electronics community, in this case the Arduino community, draws 2% female. That's a huge difference. And we think that the difference is not in the people necessarily, but in the process. The process of engaging in electronics is so different with computational textiles. Instead of having to solder wires together to build your circuits, all you have to do is know how to sew. It's that easy. Now, from this data and these statistics, I am actually creating a computational textiles curriculum. And it's a curriculum to teach computer science. It teaches computer science from the basic stuff like basic procedural thinking and variables to more advanced things like algorithms and data processing. And it teaches computer science using these projects, using computational textiles projects, using these new materials. And the goal of this is to really solidify and pave this new path, this new avenue for people to get into computer science. But unfortunately, there's some backlash against this sort of computational textiles, this new avenue of computer science. And people seem to think that it's not hard enough. It's not hardcore enough to be real engineering. It's craft, not real engineering. And I see this as a common problem at MIT. You know, when I first came here, I thought that I had to do all the hard things, as I've already told you, but I've seen so many people around me think, well, you know, I should do this major. I should do this major because I'll be respected, because it's more legit. And they don't actually pursue what they're interested in. And that's such a shame. And this happens in the real world too. In technology and in engineering, engineers like to take pride in their work, which is good, but they also like to take pride in the fact that it's hard. And unfortunately, they also look down on people who don't do what they perceive as a hard thing to do. This is very harmful. This is particularly harmful because, unfortunately, sewing often falls into the not hard category. Now, I must tell you that in all the workshops I've given, teaching people how to sew is so much harder than teaching people how to solder wires together. But that's besides the point. The point is that there are so many people creating such beautiful things with this new technology. They're creating things that are unique, that nobody's ever seen before. They're creating things that are widely applicable to so many different fields. Why does it matter whether it's hard or not, according to society? Why does it matter? It doesn't. But what's damaging is that people believe in this need for difficulty. And that really hurts anybody who's trying to enter into the computer science through this new avenue. Now, I'm not up here to tell you that people, that computational textiles and craft and sewing is the only way to get women into computer science. Of course, that's not true. And I'm not saying that computational textiles is only for women. In fact, there are tons of men, and I've worked with some, who love it. But what I am here to tell you is that it is an important thing. It's important because it lowers the barriers for people to get into computer science, especially for people who are craftsmen, who already understand how to craft, how to sew. They know these things. And it's such a simple jump from that to electronics using these new materials. And so having the option to enter computer science from a computational textiles perspective really lowers the barrier, and it empowers people who already have these skills. One woman said, "It made me brave enough to jump into electronics. Before I started this project, I had absolutely no experience with electronics of any kind." She says she still can't solder to save her life, and that's okay because she knows how to sew. And that's what's important. That's all she needs to create electronics. Now, you might wonder, why do I care about these things? Why does it matter? And I must say that I do believe in diversity. I think it is important for there to be a diversity in viewpoints and in types of people. And I do hope that one day we'll have a society where the stratifications of diversity are no longer along lines of gender or of race. But the most tragic reason is not diversity. The most tragic reason is lost potential. You could have the next Grace Hopper sitting in a high school classroom or a college classroom someday, thinking she's inadequate and choosing to pursue another field where she could have made such great discoveries in technology. We cannot afford to lose half the population by the time they're in 6th grade just because our culture and our education system fails to give them the materials, the tools, and the confidence they need to thrive. The tragedy is that lost potential. Now, today I've mostly talked about computer science. But I want to tell you, and I want to make you aware that these issues are true of most technical fields. Not only the lack of women, but also this idea of wanting to do the hard thing. You and I, deep down, we want to do the hard thing. We want to be respected, right? But, and we feel inadequate when we feel like what we're doing is not the hard thing and is not respected by other people. But we're the ones who impart this judgment and these feelings on other people and on ourselves. We're the ones who cause this to happen. And just as we have the power to provide new avenues and new entry points into a huge variety of fields, we also have the power to change the expectations and the cultural stereotypes that dominate today. We can build a society where people are not limited by the cultural expectations and not limited by what they think is well respected, but where people pursue what they're passionate about and what they care about. Those people will make a difference, and that is powerful. Thank you.